Welcome everybody once again to another Midweek with Mark with the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. This is still my favorite day of the week because I get to talk to so many people. My wife says it's just because I like to, spout off at the mouth, and she doesn't want to listen to me talk about plants. So I do appreciate you giving me an outlet for talking about plants. I'm going to talk about winter fruits today. And, I went back and forth when I was thinking about this, and I finally decided I'm just going to talk about fleshy fruits today. I'm not going to include in there grass seed heads and aster seed heads and things like that, which are lovely fruits in the landscape, but they're really lovely if you live somewhere up in the frozen tundra up north. For us down here in the balmy South, we can grow so many things that are showy. And I actually skipped hollies completely as well, because I've done a whole talk on hollies, and you can go to our YouTube channel and watch that if you want. So I really just stuck with some of the things that I think are really fun that are looking good in the Arboretum right now. And when we finish up, I have a few in-hand examples of at least one of the groups. So we'll jump right on in and talk about winter fruits at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. For those who are a little bit farther afield or joining us via YouTube, we are part of NC State University, and we're in Raleigh, North Carolina, which puts us kind of in the center of North Carolina in the Piedmont, with pretty mild winter temperatures and hot, humid summers. We are a Zone 7B garden, typically. So start with one that people a little farther north probably grow, Pyracantha or firethorn. This was a series, the Sapphire series, Sapphire Orange, Sapphire Jaune, excuse my French, that's yellow, Sapphire Scarlet, I believe, and Sapphire, or no, one Silver Linings. That was a variegated one. Pyracantha are, can be kind of beautiful shrubs. They tend to be a bit rangy, like you see here. This Sapphire series was really promoted as compact plants, growing to about 6 feet by 6 feet. This plant is probably 10 feet by 10 feet or so. They bloom in fairly early spring, loaded with white flowers. You can see there, that's a kind of late flowers on a flowering quince. So very early in the spring, they're flowering. And the fruit starts really forming kind of late summer and lasts well into fall. It's not a preferred fruit for birds, which is why it tends to last so long on the plants. Now, the other thing with this Sapphire series, in addition to at least supposedly being compact, is that they're thornless, which is nice, because I grew up in a house with a Pyracantha on the corner of it, and it was constantly grabbing me. But also, these have really proven to be quite disease resistant. They don't seem to get fire blight very easily. They don't get scab very much. They really are good plants, and it's a good fruiting plant for part shade. It fruits better than a lot of other plants in part shade, especially if you put a couple of them. Now, this is the orange, which was really the showiest in my mind. The red was okay. The other really nice one was the Sapphire, somebody help me with my Spanish, Sapphire Jaune, yellow in French, but really quite showy. Now, these are evergreen, or at least mostly evergreen plants. So you can see this is starting to color up early. You still have butterfly bush and flowers, still have leaves on everything, but they'll last well into December and January very easily. But good sized fruits and heavy fruiting. Now, we did have the yellow, the orange, you can just see the edge of right there, and a red one all planted near each other, which certainly helps with the fruiting if you have multiple types close to each other. Not as compact as the labels say, but that's pretty typical for most plants. They do seem to grow a fair bit larger than they say they will. Now, viburnums are much loved plants in landscapes. People grow them from far up north down into the pretty deep south. Up north, they really do well as fruiting plants, but they don't always fruit for us as well in the southeast. I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if that's if we have more things flowering at the same time in spring when they're going, or what the story is. But probably the very best fruiting viburnum, deciduous fruiting viburnum for the South is Viburnum satigerum. This is the tea viburnum. So like many other plants, it was, I'm sure, made into tea somewhere in Asia. It's extremely widespread through China. It's hardy, it goes to zone 5 and flowers in the spring. It's quite pretty when it flowers. It really covers itself in these flat panicles of white flowers with just a little bit of a hint of pink in them. And, you know, starting in fall, you start seeing that fruit. Starts off kind of orangey, and then as it ages and gets into the real deep winter, you can see the fruit are getting a little bit desiccated. The birds don't really love these. They'll eat them if there's nothing else around, but they really prefer something else. So it's not much of an issue with it seeding around in the garden and beyond the garden because the birds aren't moving it. But just a great workhorse plant. It is unfortunately not terribly well known, and I don't know why, because it really is a fantastic plant. Cotoneaster. Now, most of what we see as cotoneaster in the U.S., especially in the South and East, where fire blight can be a problem, are the low kind of ground covering ones like Cotoneaster dameri and Cotoneaster horizontalis. But there's a whole raft of these larger growing, large shrubs, or in some cases really tree-like cotoneasters. This is another group that really can suffer from fire blight, like the pyracantha. This is one that has been very good for us so far, Cotoneaster franchettii. I don't have a good picture of it in flower, but it has small white flowers in the spring, not super showy in flower, but really nice foliage, kind of blue-green foliage during the growing season on a kind of upright arching plant. And then these large fruits, these fruits are 3/4 of an inch, really quite a display. There are some of these larger leafed upright ones that are evergreen, some that are deciduous. Cotoneaster franchettii is kind of semi-evergreen for us. It'll hang on to most of its leaves. You can kind of see in this picture, this was taken in, I believe, January a couple of years ago. And, you know, so it's still got most of its leaves. In a really cold winter, it'll drop more of them. Seed exchanges with other botanic gardens. I'll often order some Cotoneaster just to grow out and try to see how they grow, see if they have fire blight problems or not. This franchettii has been one of the best for us that I've tried out. A plant that I kind of fell in love with up at Central Park in New York was the coral berries, the Symphoricarpos. These are fruiting shrubs. They range from white fruited ones to pale pink to deep magenta to almost lavender and burgundy. This one's pink magic, has nice pink berries. Makes a suckering shrub about maybe 3 feet tall or so. Will continue to spread as a suckering shrub kind of as long as you'll let it, but it's pretty easy to go in every few years and dig up the outside suckers, bring it back to a reasonable size. Now, I didn't put any pictures of it in flower in here because the flowers are not showy. During the growing season, before it fruits, it's kind of just a mound of green. But then before the leaves drop, these berries color up and the whole branches cover themselves. And they still look good in the garden right now. They'll continue for quite a while. I like the pink ones over the white and the very pale pink ones because after a frost, the white ones will really kind of go brown, whereas the pink and burgundy ones will hold color a little bit better. Super easy to grow, tough. The birds don't seem to eat the berries. Again, on this one, I've never seen them eating it. So that color display just lasts and lasts and lasts. Neat plant. And it's one that you see growing a little bit farther north. We don't grow it so much in the South. And I think that's mostly because people want something with color during the spring or summer. We in the South tend to be a little less worried with winter fruit because we've got camellias and hellebores and all kinds of things flowering all winter long. A little evergreen plant, kind of a sub-shrub, some little smaller plant, is Ruscus aculeatus, or butcher's broom, which is from kind of Iran and kind of the surrounding areas around Iran. This is one of the absolute best plants for dry shade. It's an evergreen plant, although all of these little spiny things, and this thing is pretty vicious. All these leaves, I'm saying, putting air quotes around that, are all very stiff and very spiny. That's why it's called butcher's broom. You can take a couple branches of this and clean up any kind of mess. These leaves are actually modified stems called cladophylls. You can see right here in kind of the center of the leaf is where it flowers and fruits from these cladophylls. And you can get real briefly get a small true leaf there as well. But with the green stems and these cladophylls, it looks good all year round. It takes some tough deer to eat this. Now, this plant, butcher's broom, Ruscus aculeatus, is dioecious, meaning it has separate male and female plants. So if you want fruit, you need to have what you know is a male and what you know is a female, which can be very, very hard to come by. Ideally, what you probably want to look for is one called either Wheeler's variety or one that's called Elizabeth Lawrence or Elizabeth Lawrence form or Elizabeth Lawrence dwarf. Both of those selections have perfect flowers, or have both male and female flowers on the same plant. So you'll get fruit even if you just grow that one plant. And one of these plants in full fruit is really pretty spectacular because the foliage stays so clean and green, and the fruits are so bright and large. I think it's an amazing plant. It only grows about 2 feet tall and 4 feet wide. The Elizabeth Lawrence dwarf form is even a little bit smaller than that, maybe 18 to 24 inches tall and about as wide. And it suckers, but not like the whorlberry, which suckers far away. This just kind of makes a bigger crown. But as this ages, you could come in here with a shovel and cut through right there and take out a chunk of that plant and propagate it that way. And so you would know it would be the type with both male and female flowers on it. Now, a kinder, gentler version of that is the poet's laurel, Danae racemosa, with the green stems. And again, these are not true leaves, they are cladophylls, so they're modified stems. Now, what that means for both the butcher's broom and the poet's laurel, but especially the poet's laurel, is that when you cut those stems, the long green stems, all of these leaf-looking things, which are actually modified stems, don't fall off like other leaves do. So if you cut stems of this, you can keep them in a vase with cut flowers or just greens for just ages. They will last and last and last for really quite a long time. And so they're really prized by people who do a lot of flower arranging, who like to bring in cut flowers, by florists. But these lovely, lovely, nice, succulent orange red fruits on there, which have seed in them, when you germinate those seed, they germinate just fine. They take forever to grow. To go from seed to a full saleable, say, showy looking quart or 2-quart pot, it might be 5 or 6 years. So you often don't see this for sale, or you'll see it for sale. You'll get a pot and it'll just have a few leaves kind of close to the soil line. It won't have these beautiful arching branches or anything like that. If you see them, you should snap them up because they're great in shade. They don't have showy flowers, but they have that great evergreen presence, and then those red berries when they get a little bit older. It's kind of odd because they take so long to grow that it's not profitable for a nursery to grow. But you'll often find if you go to like master gardener sales and things like that, they will often have dug some seedlings from around their gardens and sell them for dirt cheap. And whenever I see that, I just buy up a bunch of them because they're so hard to come by. But really great plant for shade, again, like the ruscus. You can grow them in full sun, but I think that's kind of a waste. Put them in the shade and they just always look so good year round. If you get a really cold winter, then you may get some burning on the oldest stems, and you just cut those off to clean it up. But otherwise, not much you need to do. And that's another one from kind of Syria and Iran and the Transcaucasus kind of areas. So kind of staying in this theme, small little evergreen plants for shade, we have a Sarcococa, and there are several of them out there. Most of the Sarcococa or sweet box, the fruit is black and they kind of disappear. Those black fruits just kind of disappear in the garden until you get up close to them. But Sarcococa ruscifolia, which means the ruscus leafed Sarcococa or ruscus leafed sweet box, has red fruits, and they'll even get brighter red than this, kind of almost carmine red. And you see it's flowering at the same time that it's fruiting. And the flowers are not terribly showy, but they are sweetly fragrant, I'm told. I can't smell sweet box. And you'll get fruits on often at the same time as the flowers. And a heavy fruiting plant can be really quite showy. Sarcococa ruscifolia is from a pretty widespread area in China, and much of what has been introduced in the past are from very low areas and tend to be kind of subtropical. And a lot of resources still say Sarcococa ruscifolia is only hardy to zone 9, but that's really not the case. There are hardier forms now. I think Fragrant Dragon is one that's out that's quite a bit hardier. That's a good zone 7 plant. So you want to look for that. But most anything you could buy around here, if they're growing it locally and not just buying it in from the deep south, should be hardy to zone 7B here, at least central North Carolina. And it's really nice if you can see one with fruit actually on it, because there's a lot of confusion with these plants and people often are selling the wrong things. But if you got that red fruit, it's almost certainly Sarcococa ruscifolia. Oh, a plant that I struggled with for a long time. This is Sarcandra glabra. And this is a relative of the Ardesia or marlberries, which I really like. It's a relative of not Ardesia, relative of doesn't matter. I drew a blank. But these are these little low shrubs, again, only about 18 to 24 inches tall and maybe 36 inches across. But they have these beautiful red fruits. They come from little kind of greenish white flowers, not terribly showy, but beautiful red fruits. And again, this, like the sweet box I showed, it really depends on where it comes from, because this does range from like Sri Lanka and the Philippines through India, China, and Japan. So you really want one of the Chinese or Japanese forms from a little bit higher elevations and farther northern latitudes. Evergreen, it's 7B. Don't want to go much colder than that, but beautiful orange red fruits. There are some yellow fruited forms out there, and we've grown one that the new growth was dark purple as well. That seemed to be a pretty tender one though. But the reason I struggled with growing this for so many years is I thought, well, I'm growing this for the fruit. So the more sun I give it, the more fruit I'll get. And this plant hates being in full sunlight. It wants to be in shade all year round. It really doesn't want to be under deciduous shade where it's got bright light during the winter. It does not like that. So it's great under pines. It's great on kind of a shadier side of the house or arbor or even, on the side of some larger shrubs that even during the winter will keep it shaded, because it does not like to be out in full sun at all. And that seems to be the biggest key to growing it. Now, another plant that we probably don't think of for fruit are gardenias. This is a picture I took just this morning here at the Arboretum. And if you look closely, you can see some red speckled through there. A little bit closer, you see those fruits and a lot of them. And if you get them up close, you get these bright orange fruits. Kind of heard somebody describe them as goldfish shaped. I guess so. I don't know. But they can be really quite showy, especially if you get a little snow on them. And they'll start forming pretty soon after a gardenia flowers. Now, a lot of times after the heavy spring flowering on a gardenia, people will trim them back to keep them a little bit smaller. And when they do that, they cut off all this fruit, because it really takes pretty much most of the season for it to get that nice orange color. I like it. I think it gives it another season. Of course, we're growing it mostly for those super fragrant white flowers, but the fruits are nice. Now, some of the double flowered ones will fruit very well. Chuck Hayes fruits very well, and that's got those nice big flowers. But the single flowered form, this is one called Lynn Lowry, but there are a lot of other ones, Crown Jewel, Climbs Hardy, all those, they will fruit as well if you just leave them. They fruit even better than many of the double flowered ones. And just threw one of these dogwoods in here. The shrubby dogwoods, we grow them for their winter stems. Usually they have okay white spring flowers. They can have very good fall color, like this midwinter fire. Though most of us, if we're growing it, we're waiting for those leaves to drop off so we can see those great stems up against some dark green background. But they can have very nice fruit as well. The birds will eat them. We have so much here at the Arboretum for them to eat that it's not generally the first thing they go after, but they do like those fruits. And once the leaves drop and you can really see these fruits on top of the stems, they can be quite showy. And the nice thing about those is you can grow them in kind of damp spots, wet spots in the garden, and they do very well despite that. Another plant like gardenia that we don't think of growing for fruit very often is Daphne tangutica. This is one of the easier Daphnes to grow, I think. I think easier than it is for us to grow Daphne odora in a lot of cases here in the East, where it doesn't like our humidity and wet summers. Daphne tangutica has white to pink buds opening to white flowers. Fragrant, not as fragrant as Daphne odora, but then pretty reliably it's followed by nice red fruit. And it will fruit, it kind of flowers mostly March, April for us. And it'll start forming fruit after that, but it'll also sporadically flower throughout the season. And that's what gives us the fruit that really lasts through winter. And you can take these fruit and sow the seed and they do great, or you can leave them out in the garden and let them be showy on the plant. I really like Daphne tangutica, and I'm not sure why it's not more widely available here in the East. I think it's mostly because nurserymen are terrified of Daphne because it's easy to overwater in the nursery. But I think this species is a little bit easier in production. Daphnophyllum, lovely evergreen shrub or tree. During the winter, it gets fruit on it. And while the flowers are often kind of, people turn their nose at the flowers, I think they can be quite showy in the spring when they come out. And on the best forms, they can be really spectacular in fruit. The only problem is you can see it flowers and the new growth is up above the flowers. So the fruit is always a little bit behind the newest growth. So it's a little bit obscured, but it fruits heavily enough that shouldn't be a problem. You can still see it for sure. And it can grow as a kind of a dense shrub like this, or more as a single stem tree. A lot of that has to do with how we maintain it as a young plant. Are we cutting it back? But also where the seed was collected, the parents of it. This to me is one of the finest forms around, with these really beautiful red petioles on the leaves. And we've sown a bunch of seed of this collection. So we hope we're going to have a bunch of these to pass around to folks because it is such a nice form. Fatsia, again, another plant that I've just taken pictures of out in the garden in the last couple of days. This is the Taiwan Fatsia. Now, Fatsia japonica does well also, but I love these forming fruits. You can see this is the fruit stalk, and this is it now. And they'll turn purple black over time. But right now they look like little doll's eyes on these little stalks out here. I just think that's so cool. This particular collection has been a good 7B plant for us. Takes a little bit of damage in really cold winters, but not much, and recovers very, very quickly. This is the first year it has flowered and fruited for us. It's going to be very interesting to see the seedlings from this, because we have a Fatsia japonica that was nearby that's flowering at the same time. So we're going to grow seed out of both plants, the Fatsia polycarpa and the Fatsia japonica, and see if we get any hybrids from these. And hopefully next year we'll have the time to actually do some hand pollination to make sure we get some crosses between the two, going both directions. Had to put at least one conifer in here. Some conifers have very showy fruits. They are not technically fruits, so don't come after me. They're exposed ovaries. This is the Podocarpus macrophyllus, the Chinese podocarp. This particular one is the one that flushes yellow, called kinmi. But you can see this is the seed, and this is what part of the flower structure. So you see you get the red and then this silvery blue. You can wipe that waxy layer off and it's green underneath. But I think they're beautiful. Again, you need to get up close to it. It's kind of like yews, if you're familiar with taxus, with the true yews. They have a glossy red structure right here, and then the seed kind of pops out. We do have, from a grower in China, we have some taxus where this part is yellow, and also ones where it's purple in addition to the red ones. So we'll see. They're very excited about it. I don't know if we're going to get people growing yews for their fruit, but who knows, maybe. Persimmons, getting in some edible fruits. Persimmons, the Japanese persimmon in particular, this is the more typical form, upright tree with these kind of squat little pumpkin-like fruits. This is one with a more spindle fruit, so on the weeping form, but both Diospyros khaki. The fruits form in late summer into fall, but they will hang on the tree if you don't harvest them, and if you can protect them from the squirrels, into January. And they actually, the longer they hang on the tree or hang outside in the cold, the sweeter they get. So it helps to leave them out, but the squirrels can beat you to them if you're not netting your plants. But just as an ornamental, they're really nice. And they get great fall color. They don't get as big as our native one, so there's a lot going for them. And there's some really good seedless varieties that are as big as a Washington state grown apple that are just, they're almost a meal. For those who don't have quite as much room, there's Lycium barbarum, or wolfberry, sometimes called wolfberry. This is what it's called now, you probably know it as goji berry. It's one of those super fruits. Both Lycium barbarum, like this one, but also Lycium chinensis is the other goji berry that you can get. These are quite hardy plants. I think they go to zone 5 maybe. They'll grow kind of these long upright shoots to about 5 or 6 feet tall, have these pretty lavender flowers, and they're followed by these fruits. And you want to leave them on the plant until they get to be bright red, and then they're really sweet. You can collect them and eat them fresh, or you can dry them like raisins, which is how you often get them in the grocery store, and they're really good. People tend to think goji berries and things like that they get, in their smoothies and whatever are, all tropical plants, but this is a perfectly hardy plant that you can grow. And look for some of the named ones like firecracker. What's great about firecracker is it's thornless, because these tend to have thorns on them. Best with sun. And I'll finish up with some citrus that we can grow. And when I and after the slides, I'll actually show you some of these citrus. So this is Citrus cavalieri. Should have another I on the end, cavalieri. This was originally called Citrus ichengensis, and you can still sometimes see it as Citrus ichengensis. It's an evergreen shrub or small tree. All of these citrus have the really nicely scented orange blossom flowers, these white flowers. In this species can sometimes be tinged pink, that are really sweetly fragrant. And then you get these knobbly fruits, which can be greenish to yellow to almost orange, depending on the plant. And then they have these weird leaves, and I'm going to show you the leaf in person in a second and talk about that. But remember these weird leaves. It does have thorns on it. This is the hardiest species of citrus, excluding citrus or Pansyris trifoliata, the hardy orange. We have been growing this in our Zone 7 garden since 2000, and the plant still looks great. I went out and checked it out today. It looks fantastic. Did not have any fruit on it today. I'm not sure why. If you like Japanese food or cook Japanese food, you probably are familiar with yuzu, which is a kind of a citrus flavored, often used with marinades or in the place of lemon juice, like we would use it a lot of times. That's a cross. Yuzu is a cross between this plant and the mandarin orange. So a little bit sweeter, but very, very tasty. So the I-Ching orange or citrus or forget another name for it. And the foliage also has a good lemony fragrance and flavor. You can use it in cooking, kind of like you can Kefir lime. Another plant that has surprised us with how hardy it is, we actually put it in 2009, really just to take up some space, is what's known as Citradia. This is the hardy orange Pansyris trifoliata, which is hardy into Zone 6. Now, a lot of times you're seen as Citrus trifoliata, so that may be a better name, crossed with sour orange, Citrus auranticum. Sometimes it's either called sour orange or Seville orange sometimes. And I'll show you the fruit, but the fruit's kind of pear-shaped, upright stems, thorny branches, gets loads of fruit, and it's good size. I'll show you the fruit and talk about it in just a second. Just want to show you a couple more. Another one is this, again, the Pansyris trifoliata, that very hardy form, crossed with grapefruit, Citrus paradisi. And this selection is called Dunstan. This hybrid is called Dunstan. And often you'll see this listed as a true grapefruit. It is not a true grapefruit. If you've ever tasted it, you know it's not a true grapefruit. It is a cross between these two. So it's a little more bitter than grapefruit would be, not quite as large. But this is the plant, loaded with fruit. This is a picture I took of the ground today. We don't have our volunteers to pick up all these fruits, but there is a ton of it. Again, this was planted in 2009 and is probably 15, 20 feet tall now, and just loads of fruit on it every year. Not quite as big as this Citrus japonica, which is known as the round kumquat. This has not been quite as hardy for us. In a cold winter, single digits, it'll die back to the ground, but it has resprouted for almost 10 years now. It's been in the ground since 2011 and keeps coming back. It's out there right now with fruit on it. So it's a tough plant. And I'm gonna come back and revisit these citrus in just a minute and answer questions and things. But I want to end with some of the things Chris mentioned, but they bear repeating. One is this class with Bryce Lane, 3-time Emmy Award-winning speaker, television personality. He's doing an 8-week class on nomenclature and plant taxonomy, but geared for a home gardener. So because taxonomy and nomenclature, knowing this stuff can tell you a lot about a plant. So this is going to help make you a better gardener, and it's very cool. 8 weeks. If you can't make them all, they are recorded, and if you've registered for the class, you'll have access to all of those recordings. So even if you can't make every one of them, you'll still be able to get them. And that starts this coming Monday, is the first in the series. So sign up. There's a limit to how many participants, just because Bryce likes to really give people a lot of attention. So if you think you might be interested, look into that on our website. He's going to be back on next Saturday, not this Saturday, but the following, with his soils class, a 4-hour soils class. Again, this requires registration. If you're a landscape architect in North Carolina, you can get 4 credit hours. And there is no more important thing to know to be a good gardener than dealing with soils, how to make better soils, how to how to really grow plants better. It is the single most important thing you can know to be a good gardener, is knowing about your soils. Chris mentioned this as well. Gardening in the South, this is February 6th. This is a free program. You do need to register, but it is free. We've got 3 great speakers. Basil Camus of Leaf and Limb Arbor tree experts here locally. He's going to tell you 4 ways to make your trees happy and 2 errors to avoid, which I like that. Another talk on soils, Bill Fontenot. With 4 hours, Bryce is going to have a lot of time to go in really in depth with you. Bill's will be a little bit shorter, but his 45-minute talk on how to build garden soils at home is one of the best talks I've ever heard given, with just good, solid, hey, I can use this information when I go right now. And then Denisha Seth Carley, another PhD here at NC State, is going to be talking about pollinator gardens. She's done a lot of research on pollinators. She is a researcher. She and Ann Spafford, a designer in the department, they have a book on pollinators and pollinator gardens coming out in March. So look forward to hearing them both speak about the book coming up in the spring. But yeah, we're really excited to have her. She is fantastic, so knowledgeable. She's just amazing. And then just a couple more things. We've got Mary Louise Ravisi of Bella Vista Photography. She's doing a 3-week course on digital photography for Canon photographers and a 3-week course for Nikon photographers. So she is really going to go into detail about how you can be a better photographer, digital photographer, no matter what kind of, whether you use a Canon or a Nikon. I keep getting frustrated because my wife bought a really nice Olympus camera and she needs somebody to show her how to use it. So we got to do an Olympus one of these days. These are fantastic programs. If you want to become a better photographer, you should look into those. And I'll end with our winter symposium, Eat, Drink, and Be Merry. We've got 2 folks from NC State, Dr. Bowen, Dr. DeGazelle. Dr. Bowen's talking about tequila. I think I have that right. And Dr. DeGazelle is going to be talking about chocolate and the impact with the communities and people and those sorts of things. It's not just about the plants. It's really about people and plants, how they intersect. And that science is ethnobotany. And the other person we're going to have is Dr. Brad Bennett from Florida International, who goes all over South America, finding out what indigenous people's plants they're using, how they're using them. This is a picture I took of Brad Bennett in Ecuador. You can go to our YouTube site and look for this talk I gave about that trip that he accompanied me on to Ecuador. Gave me the single best advice for traveling, and that is always carry a little bottle of hot sauce, because no matter what you're served, if you put enough hot sauce on it, you can eat it. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and I have a couple of show and tells, and then I'll answer questions people may have. So I mentioned Citrus ichengensis, or now Citrus cavallerii. This is the foliage from the plant. Now it looks like it's 2 leaves stacked on top of each other. It's actually not. This bottom part, which is winged, is actually the leaf petiole, the leaf stalk, and then just this part is the true leaf. Differences only a botanist could love, but it sure makes for an interesting looking plant out there. Now, unfortunately, it didn't have fruit this year, and I'm not sure why. It might be because it's getting a little bit shaded, or more likely when it was really in flower, we had rain during that time, and that the pollinators weren't out moving the pollen around. It usually does flower for us, but really typical with much of the citrus family, they have these smooth green young stems, and often, I don't know if you can see them, but often spines as well. They can be pretty vicious plants if you get caught up into a citrus plant. All right, I'm gonna see if I can do this without making too much of a mess. This is the Poncirus trifoliata by sour orange, Citrus auranticum. And people look at these and they're like, oh boy, can I eat that? And the answer is, yeah, if you really want to. I always say I was always told with the trifoliate or hardy orange, Buncyrus trifoliata, that it made great marmalade, which I always repeated to people. And, you know, I'm never making marmalade. So finally somebody said, they're great. It's great in a whiskey sour. So in recognition of that person, every year I bring a couple of hardy orange fruits, which interestingly does not keep its fruits through much of the winter, which is why I didn't show it. They usually drop off in fall, but I make a couple of whiskey sours with them. So you can see how thick that peel is on there. And it is, you know, filled with those citrus oils. And if you just smell it, it's got a very kind of bittery citrus smell, like a sour orange to it. Let's see. It's been years since I tasted it. I think I remember why, but yeah, that's like got all the bitter of a really bitter grapefruit, along with some of the sour and none of the sweet. But I know there are people who do things with like citrus oils. I don't know what that is, but with these plants, you know, you've got a lot of that citrus oil in the peel. And I imagine, you know, I've seen, you know, dry citrus in like potpourri and things like that. I imagine you could do that just fine with this. I am sure there's going to be somebody who's going to tell me a great use for these things on here. If it involves liquor, like a whiskey sour, I may actually try it. Otherwise, maybe not. So this is the Citrus Dunstan, the grapefruit by Trifoliate Orange. My knife isn't long enough to go all the way to the middle. But again, you can see it's got a pretty thick rind, not quite as thick as the sour orange. This plant, this Dunstan, people do grow it and eat it like a grapefruit. You know, one of the parents is a grapefruit. Some people swear that it is a true grapefruit and isn't a hybrid. I don't believe those people. Yeah, it's like a not very good grapefruit. It's not awful. You might want a little sugar on there. And let me tell you, I love grapefruit. I love grapefruit juice. I love grapefruits. I wouldn't choose to eat this one, but you know, there are people who are more excited than I am to grow their own food. I'm more than happy to let farmers grow my food and get it that way. But you know, there are people who live in Maryland. The farthest north one I know is Wheaton, Maryland. I know there's somebody there who grows this, and you know, they love it. They eat all, you know, grapefruits all year long. I always wonder about that, if they really do. All right, now the other end of the scale from this guy is this little guy. This is the Citrus japonica, that round kumquat. I don't know. Let's see if I'm sharp enough. Some years they get a little bit larger than this, like marble sized, but not much. And you probably can't see this, but let me squeeze it out. So out of that, those are seeds. There is zero flesh in here. It is just a thin little rind and great big seeds. So nothing to eat on the round kumquat. It's good for decoration, and that's about it. All right. Happy to answer questions.
There are a couple of quick things, Mark. Bonnie mentioned that the citrus would make a good Cuban marinade for chicken or pork. And that sounded tasty, yeah. So there's a non-alcohol one for you. Definitely. And Sandy Sandy just asked or commented that you often say that you don't have a good nose for smells, and she wondered if that affects your sense of taste, that you think.
You
She's
know,
asking for.
you would think it should affect my sense of taste, but and maybe it does. Maybe that's why I'll eat just about anything. But I can generally, I'm actually pretty good at like being able to tell what's in what I'm eating, parse out the flavors and things like that. So I don't know. Maybe if my sense of smell was better, I'd be one of those super tasters, but now I'm just like a regular person. I don't know. But yeah. What was the citrus I cut up right before the Dunstan? This was the Citradia. This is the trifoliate orange crossed with the sour or Seville orange, Sistrum auranticum. And they're really distinct. They usually have this pear shape to them.
Mm.
So I believe I was able to answer all the questions in the chat, most of which were, do birds eat that fruit? So quick internet searches gave me the result for all those. So if anyone has any new questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the questions, or ask it in the chat. We'll get to it. They did love the demonstrations of eating the fruit, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I'll just collect fruit out in the garden and eat it. Question, is there a link to the PowerPoint? It will be posted on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, relatively soon, in the next week or so. What's the best native fruit for Piedmont garden? What's that?
I was just going to say, I typically post a midweek with Mark the following Monday.
Yeah, I just didn't want to put you on the spot.
That's why I said typically.
Yeah. The question, what's the best native fruit for Piedmont gardens? If we're talking about edible fruit, the best native fruit would be, I would say, persimmon or pawpaw, depending on what you like.
There were a couple of questions about Meyer lemon. Someone asked if we had ever grown one before, and someone just lost it because it moved too fast about Meyers. Yeah. I do remember Frank Hyman's class, and there actually is a hardy lemon for our area, but I can't remember which one it was. So look for that one. So yeah, Meyer lemons are, if you get them in the right spot, you can keep them alive unless we have a really cold winter. Do some protection when it drops down cold. I know somebody here in Raleigh who grows, help me out with the orange, the Satsuma oranges, and keeps them alive. But he's got it right up against his house, and in a cold winter, he'll put up some wind blocks and things like that. So it's possible, but the Meyer lemon will take some protection for sure. Oh, and there's a question about blueberries. Blueberries are native to this area. Now, the good producing blueberries are hybrids, but really mostly hybrids with our native species, the edible ones. So those are great native fruits. So
I have a question.
Yep.
This is Diane Lunchik. I just got in at the end of this. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that this year, you know how oak trees have a mass crop some years? Well, do these berry bushes, like every holly bush I look at is loaded, the pyracanthus are falling over, I feel like there's so much more berries this year. Do they have a mass crop of berries sometimes? So there's a couple of different things. Some fruiting plants, like you said, have a mast year where it's just a really big year. That tends to be more of a shade tree type thing. Many fruiting plants have kind of a biannual production where they'll have a heavy fruit set, a really heavy fruit set one year, light fruit set the next year, heavy fruit set again the next year. And so apple growers actually reduce the fruit set so that they don't have heavy light. They have kind of, a mid-range every year. And then the other kind of big issue with fruiting plants, and this is what you more typically see when you have a whole bunch of different plants like this year, a lot of plants in fruit, is
you had a really good, while those plants were flowering, weather was good, the pollinators were out, didn't rain, the conditions were right for there to be a lot of pollination of the plants. And so when you see a lot of different things fruiting well, that's more typically what you get. What's happened is just, it was a good year for the pollinators.
Wow, because it's sometimes I don't know whether it's just me noticing, but it just seems everywhere. There's so many berries everywhere. The birds ought to be very happy, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I was typing an answer, Mark, so I may have missed it, but doesn't fruit thinning kind of help out with the uneven berryness and fruitness?
Yeah.
So
if you're growing for production, you can thin out your fruit so that you get better fruit. You get more even fruiting.
spreads it out.
Let's see, Kefir lime has a double leaf, like I showed. Yeah, and is it related? It's another citrus, so those are related.
You're breaking up.
I'm breaking up. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Last couple answers about fruit thinning. Was that some characteristic of berry producing plants?
No, that's
Chris?
more. The fruit thinning is really more of the fruit thinning is really more of a thing with orchard crops.
Okay.
It's apples, peaches, that kind of thing.
Right. Okay. All right. Whatever. Okay. It was just interesting to see if there was some kind of mass crop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody
Sorry,
asked
I said, sorry, I missed most of the lecture, but I can pick it up on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you.
Somebody asked about baby blackberry. Yeah, the blackberries are native. And if you're going to grow blackberries, what I recommend, blackberries, the wild blackberries, the old blackberries were ones that they put canes up the first year, and then the second year those canes fruited. And then you could cut those canes back, and it always fruited on the second year of canes. There are a lot of them now, like the baby blackberry, that fruit on the first year canes. So they grow, they come up, they flower, they fruit, you collect the fruit, and then you cut them back to the ground. And the next year they come up and they flower and they fruit, and you collect them and you cut them back to the ground over the winter. And that way you never have these big thorny patches that get out of control, because it's always hard. You had to go in and cut the 2-year-old stems, but leave the 1-year-old stems if you wanted good production, or you just leave the whole thing and it becomes a mess. And then eventually you sell the house and move away because the blackberries are taken over. So they're doing great work with small fruit breeding here at NC State, and they've bred some great blackberries and raspberries that are first season fruiting. Correction, that Satsuma oranges in Japan called Ehime. I like that. You're always welcome to correct my Japanese, French, Spanish, Chinese. I speak one language moderately well, and that's English. Other than that, it is no guarantees.
This might be a good time to remind folks or let folks know that the plant buggy is going to be closed for the remainder of January just for our inventory purposes, but we'll be putting it back out in February. So come back real soon.
And one program that I didn't put a notice up there about because it's not ours, although we're co-hosting it with the Arboretum, is Magnolia Society International on February 13th in the afternoon. Unlike a lot of the morning things we do, there's going to be 3 fantastic speakers. John Grimshaw, who was the curator at Wisley Gardens, who's written books about magnolias. Scott McMahon from the Atlanta Botanic Garden, who goes out and collects magnolias in the wild. Somebody I go collecting with often, but he's super knowledgeable. And then Marcela Serna from Colombia, who's been kind of at the forefront of discovering all these new magnolias in Central America. The registration for that, I'm not sure if it's up quite yet, but that's through the Magnolia Society International webpage. But it will be, Chris will be running the technology like he does here, and I'll be there to welcome you all and everything. But it'll be a fantastic program as well. And it is free for Magnolia Society members. And if you're not a member and want to join, it's $40, which coincidentally is the same cost as a membership. So you can do the program and you get a free membership, or you can pay for a membership and get a free program. Either way, it's a deal. They put out a great journal. It's a really professional, high quality journal that's put out.
We just had a few good questions, Mark, in the chat, if you are able to answer a few more. Robin asked, whoops, it just moved. Sorry. Robin asked, where can we get the blackberries from NC State? You know?
They are licensed with the big growers. I can't remember all the names of them. Maybe Arlene wants to do a quick NCSU blackberry raspberry search and throw some names out for us.
Well, I do remember from years ago that the Gina Fernandez, the blackberry bramble person, had a very good website, at least for diseases. So she probably has something out there for cultivar releases that you can then look for on the web.
Yeah. And I've talked with her. I brought a Japanese colleague in who was discussing trying to import them to Japan. So,
and maybe it's time for us to invite Gina back for a presentation for brambles.
I think that'd be great. I think she has done a ton of work on those. I think it could be very interesting.
Kat has asked citrus for our area that is sweeter.
A hardy citrus for our area that is sweeter. None.
Let's see, what was sugar on
it? The best you're going to do is a Satsuma and really, really protect it when it gets cold. That's about the best you can do. I mean, that's really good. And if you get 2 or 3 or 5 off of there, you're going to be just thrilled to death with it.
Better tasting citrus. Sorry, Mark. Better tasting citrus can be grown in containers and left outside for a good part of the year, and then brought inside during the colder parts, especially if you have a room. So
there are, if you're really interested, there's the Hardy Palm Society kind of enveloped the southeastern citrus, Hardy Citrus Society, something like that. They kind of do palms and citrus a lot. And there are people who belong to that who will plant their plants in the ground. And then when it's going to get cold, they will, get a little pop-up, one of those little 10 by 10 pop-up things, and put that in there and put some lights on in there for heat and wrap it in plastic and everything. Somebody said that they've been growing Meyer lemons for years in Wilmington area. They just keep it in a pot and bring it inside when it's going to get cold. So
that's what I do.
Yeah.
I bring mine in.
So certainly can do that. And we got a link to the blackberries and raspberries, the varieties, and there we've got 2 different links. So that's perfect for you in the chat if you want those berries.
And Maggie has what is the best fruit for birds? Winter fruit for birds.
Gosh. So our native beauty berry is fantastic. Now I don't consider it a winter fruit because the fruits are all gone early, but there isn't really one best. A variety of plants, hollies and beauty berries, and just doing a variety is you'll get, the different sized birds, the different, what appeals to different things. So I wouldn't worry so much.
Dogwoods.
I was gonna say, I always enjoy my dogwood. It seems like you eat it and then
dogwood,
and then a horde of birds on the tree for the day, and then they're all gone.
Yep.
And that's also why you want to have different things, so you can have different seasons and longer lasting fruit for them.
Yep. That's a good one.
And of course, my leaping yopon is always fun because there's always a mockingbird on top of it guarding the fruit for later in the season.
Well, and I'll say one of the very best fruits for the birds is blueberries. You plant a whole bunch of blueberries. If you don't get them, you're not going to get any blueberries. So
you're right about
the birds
that.
will take them all. So that's a great one.
That took care of the last of the questions in the chat, Mark.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
a workshop on small fruits would be good.
What's that? Say again?
I said a workshop on small fruits like that would be great.
That would be great. We definitely have the folks who can do that. We got, the brambles, the blueberries,
Yeah.
grapes.
You know Craig Mooney? Do you know
Mhm.
Craig Mooney?
Yeah,
Yeah, he does great workshops.
I think that'd be a great one. Thank you for the suggestion.
I'll
Thank
be
Lynn.
there.
And if nobody's bored with me now, I'm going to be talking to the Northwest Horticultural Society tonight, 7 o'clock Pacific time, 10 o'clock Eastern. So I'm going to stay up past my bedtime to give this talk.
What's your topic?
Life is too short for boring plants, I think.
Oh,
The
so anything
moving air,
else?
the unusual.
That's
Maybe
really
talk about the weird
specific.
things. Anybody can stay up that late.
Well, thanks a bunch, Mark. And thank you so much to everyone for coming out today. We had a great group of folks, and we're looking forward to seeing you again, hopefully on Saturday, but if not Saturday, next Wednesday at 3.
Thank you as always.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Y'all
everyone.
take care.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank
You
you. You
too.
too.
Well.